Welcome, everyone, to this month's Insight Jam session. This month, we're going to explore why now is the time to move to data-centric AI. And that's really going to be done in contrast to model-centric AI, which, according to Gartner, is where most people are starting today. And I'll focus a little bit on that. But to help you with that, we've brought together a number of experts in the area, and they're going to talk about the pragmatic aspects of, what is data-centric AI? Why would you want to focus on that? Some of the technologies required and some of the practical implementation opportunities. Is something a great idea not implemented doesn't provide a lot of value. So we're going to really focus on that pragmatic advice as well. Let's talk a little bit about data-centric AI and model-centric AI. I'll start with a Gartner definition. My eyes will be down here as I read, but data-centric AI is an approach that focuses on enhancing and enriching the training data to drive better AI outcomes. Now, this is opposed to a model-centric approach, wherein AI outcomes are driven by model tuning. Data-centric AI also addresses data quality, privacy, and scalability. So that's directly from Gartner. Model-centric AI, there's nothing wrong with it. And a lot of people start there, and this part of our conversation today is be about that transition. But the costs of model-centric AI are staggering. We certainly have model builders in short supply, and they're expensive. Model complexity is increasing faster than model effectiveness. And then finally, models that are trained on clean data oftentimes fail when they encounter the real world's messy stuff. So this is why this idea of data-centric AI has arisen. And you think about it, kind of going back to Sun Tzu and the art of war and tactics and strategy. He advises that in all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining the battle, but indirect methods are needed for securing victory. So perhaps the analogy here is that the direct method has been model-centric AI today, but the indirect methods needed to secure victory is going to be data-centric AI. So let's examine that. One other point from Sun Tzu is that controlling a large force is the same principle as controlling a few men. It's merely a question of dividing the numbers. And in a sense, maybe it isn't going to be an either or between model-centric AI and data-centric AI, but an allocation decision and a timing decision. So that's why, we brought in experts to kind of help you think through not just the definition, but the opportunity. So let's begin by introducing that panel. I'll start with my longtime friend, Dave Sweenor. Dave, tell us about yourself, your company, and your role at the firm and what you're working on these days, some of your special projects.
Sure, Bob. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's good to see you again. So David Sweenor, I'm dialing in from the Green Mountain State. I'm currently the director of marketing at Elation. So it's the leading data intelligence company out there. And for those who aren't familiar with it, just think about it like this. Data is everywhere. It's in file systems, Snowflake, Teradata, what have you. This is not news to longtime practitioners, but our data intelligence platform is like Amazon for your data. So it allows you to find it, trust it, understand it, and govern that data. So as the director of product marketing, it's really my role to understand our customers' needs and challenges and essentially how they can unlock value with that data.
Great. And you're a prolific author?
Yeah, I'm also the founder of Tiny Tech Guides, Bob. Thanks for that. And you see several of the colored books above my head. So if anybody's interested in purchasing or becoming an author or sponsor, let me know.
Tiny Tech Guides.
That's like great.
Guy, tell us about DataOps Live, you and your role there.
Hi, Guidance. I'm CTO and co-founder of DataOps.live. I've been doing this about 5 years. Prior to that, my background was 20 years building software development organizations. So I've I've taken a lot of organizations on the Agile DevOps CI/CD journey, and about 5 years ago, I kind of came to bring that experience to bear on the data world. I've co-authored DataOps for Dummies and Data Products for Dummies more recently. DataOps is the de facto standard data operations platform in the Snowflake ecosystem. In fact, we were just in the Gartner market report on DataOps a few weeks ago, listed as one of the reference vendors. They're quoting DataOps bringing customers a 10x efficiency improvement by 2026, which is a figure that's backed up by our customers. In fact, one of our biggest customers was quoted in that guide as saying, we went from a few releases a year to 120 releases a month. So that's the sort of an increase in agility that customers are getting by adopting proper DataOps principles, DataOps technology, end-to-end automation, environment management, automated testing.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. Good to meet you, Mike, or Guy. Mike, we've had you on before. Give us a little update on you, what you're doing, your company, etc.
Yeah, thanks. Honored to be on here with Guy and David, and you again, Robert. I'm with Infovia. Founded Infovia about 7 years ago. We had the privilege of working with organizations to help them manage their data pipelines using automation. And it turns out that it paves the way for good AI because the garbage in, garbage out principle applies. So we help them sort through the data and make useful components out of it so that they can build things like AI apps on top of them. We use AI to structure the data. We use AI to parse, discover, retrieve data. And we structure it in a way. I like to say my son works for Lego, and he's always had a lot of Legos. So if you imagine walking into a room in the dark with Legos on the floor, it's painful, right? Well, that's organizations that we walk into. They have a lot of data, but it's all over the place, and it's not very useful because it's not sorted, aggregated, integrated, and scrubbed. And so, some of the tools like DataOps Live and Elation help with that process. We're the implementation side of that. We help the organization use the right tools to get their data ready to use AI and to build AI solutions and reports and analytics. Everything doesn't have to be AI driven. But it sure does help in the process.
Right. So AI inside towards AI solutions, but also analytic solutions and other things. And really, I think it is, continues to be valuable for optimizing processes, making decisions, etc. But all the new AI applications as well, which seems to get the attention of the CEO and the funding.
That's right. It's amazing that the size of organizations in the world that are still run off Excel, and so we're helping to improve that.
All right, so guys, why don't we start with the question? I'll start with you, Dave. What is data-centric AI? How would you define it?
I think most organizations really, as you open, Bob, or most data scientists anyways, they sort of treat data, in my mind, as sort of it's fixed, sort of a static input. And so we start with this pile of data, and then we iterate through. We're going to try model A, model B, model C, whatever. And then once we find one we like or we specialize in, we just sort of continually, refine the hyperparameters and fine tuning, just trying to squeak out a little more, accuracy or whatever your metric is with that. And, data-centric AI flips that script essentially. And so rather than saying data is fixed, start with the data. You have the right data to make the business decision that you're trying to make, and go find that data to make that business decision. So I think it's just a different approach. Obviously, you need models and you need data, but rather than treating data as fixed, it's really examining what data you need to make that business decision, and then working backwards from that and then applying AI or ML or analytics to that data.
Thanks, Dave. Guy, how would you add to that?
Well, agree very strongly with David. I think one of the fundamental shift here is that in the early days of AI, we call the experimental phase, the data is the thing that is fixed and the model is the thing that's variable. That's the thing we're playing with. As we move from experimental phase to operational phase, actually the model now becomes a much more fixed component. And it turns out that data, because very often the data feeds we're talking about are things that are streaming in close to real time anyway, that becomes the variable that we're dealing with. And I disagree with the Gartner definition a little bit. I would say actually, for some things, some of the quantitative things like time series forecasting, there's always been data-centric. You've always, the data has always been the foundation of that. Whereas if you take something more qualitative like LLM, if Gartner says, it's about having the right data to train rather than fine tune. I think that's the wrong distinction. I think that's a very technological distinction. To me, it doesn't really matter whether I train a model from scratch, whether I fine tune a model. That's, there's a lot of semantics between that. The point is that I'm focusing on really good quality data, and I end up with an output, an artifact, which is best for what I want. If that's training from scratch, great. If it's fine tuning, that's okay too. So I don't think the Gartner distinction of saying, well, if it's fine tuning, it's automatically model centric is necessarily right. If I'm still focusing on data at the heart of it, I may be using it to fine tune a model. That's still okay, but it's still data is the fundamental thing I'm focusing on. That to me is what data centric is.
Right, but a really interesting distinction that you make between the phases and the fixed and variable. Maybe once you've gathered your initial data set, you have to kind of hold that for a while while you work on the model, and that you're iterating. But then maybe later on, once you get the model right, as you're saying, that you're not done. The data is going to keep evolving and hopefully improving, and then the model can improve with it. I think that's a nice distinction.
And ultimately, you're going to have, over time, you're going to have both dimensions. You're going to have your data is changing continuously, but the model landscape is not fixed. 3 months' time, hey, 5 new base models have come out, or 6 new, heuristics have come out, and I want to try those, and I want to see if they perform better. So you're going to ultimately end up experimenting and changing in both dimensions. The trick is only vary one at a time. You can't evaluate the model if the data set's changing. You can't, you can't work through your data set if the model is changing.
Got it. Guy, do you have some color to add here? Colored Legos. No, just kidding. Some more color.
So, Robert, I love it that, I love the comments about the changing, the shifting. I think of we're chasing a moving target. We need to not only be able to manage the change to the data, but also who should be seeing which subsets of that data. So are we considering that somebody within an organization that works in R&D has access to newer and fresher product data than somebody who works in maybe the production or marketing arena? And so that's a situation where the context of who is asking is another aspect of the changing data. Otherwise, I pretty much, agree with what Guy and Dave have said, and I believe that we just we need to leverage the technologies that allow us to make those decisions on the continuum of quality and speed. I'll share a little more about that later.
Okay, great. Guy, you've been in this data business a long time, and you're focusing on the processes now, the data ops processes. Why is this more data-centric approach needed today?
I think it's going back to that phase. Ultimately, it's needed because AI is now going to step up and deliver the value it's been promising for so long. In many ways, it may be slightly unkind, but you could say a lot of the use that people have had for AI, up to now has been a solution in need of a problem. Here's a shiny toy. Let me do some cool things with it. And I think the business is changing the question that they're asking. For a long time, the business is asking, what can AI do? And what can AI do? That kind of suits a really model-centric world. Now the question is, what can AI do for us? And the for us bit is critical, because the for us bit, just work with, petabytes of public data and things like that. The for us bit is fundamentally based on our data and our data that's unique to us. So I think it's that need for AI to start delivering value, and the value very specific to that business means that it has to be focused on the data for that business, not just a general corpus of data.
Dave, would you add, change, or delete to that definition?
No, I like that. What's it going to do for us? And, I think about, data-centric AI, it's this iterative approach to constantly refining your data like we would do with models. And I see like 3 pillars to it. There's data quality. So we spoke about, mentioned earlier, garbage in, garbage out. I think people under that, data's the trusted foundation. I think consistency. So that's uniformity of definitions, formats, and structures. And then relevance, you got to use data that's specific to the problem or the use case or the decision you're trying to make. And just like a quick story. So I started out doing data science and in manufacturing semiconductors, to be specific. So I mentioned about consistency. We'd get data from all over the place, and different testers would send this data in. And people don't know, wafers are round. So think about a record. They're about 300 millimeters, so about the size of a record. And there's a little notch in there. But each tester would send the data to the warehouse differently. And so meaning chip 1-1 could be at 6 o'clock. It could have been at 3 o'clock. It could have been at 12 o'clock. And so when you're trying to look at spatial patterns on wafers, having that consistency, where every time we get data, the notch will be down at this. We have that consistent definition was extremely important. It took a bit of time before people realized that things were different. And that's why we weren't seeing patterns in wafers. So sometimes this just starts out with the data definitions and make sure we're working from the same definition. Like we ask people today, what's a customer in your organization? Is it someone who bought something yesterday, the last 30 days, the last 60 days? How do you define a customer? These questions are often unanswered in many businesses.
Before I ask your answer to this question, Guy, have you ever worked in the semiconductor industry?
So I came from the semiconductor industry as well. I don't know if you meant to address that to Guy or me.
No, Guy, have you ever worked?
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, I have not.
Oh, well, that's one of us. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Guy. Data-centric approach, why needed now? We've had a couple of answers here. What do you think? Mike? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, also coming from the semiconductor industry, spent 2.5 decades there at Micron. It was very, we have a story that I tell. I think it's probably appropriate since we brought it up here, but a certain operator in the fab was wearing hairspray, and it was scrapping product. But it took months to figure that out, and $6, $7, $8 million worth of product was scrapped during that time. So in those days, we didn't have the AI solutions. We had to bring in, we called them data scientists, but they were really just skilled analysts that knew how to keep peeling back the layers of the onion until you found out what was the correlating factor in all of the upstream process that caused in that case, it was a defect. And so I believe that applies, today but we have better tools for processing that data and for finding those insights. Computers are frankly really good at identifying those patterns, where humans, when you get more than a couple of dimensions deep, humans fail in that regard. And so I think to put all that together, we really need to continue to consider whether the solution that we're focusing on within the organization, what AI can do for me, as you said, Guy. I like that. We need to consider whether that is achievable within our organization. Do we have the right people to make it happen? Do we have the right tech to make it happen? And do we have the pocketbook for it? And again, I think it comes down to speed versus quality. How quickly do we need to make the decision, and what is on the line if we make the wrong one? based on that information. Self-driving cars would be another example. Just when you think there's a standard and a yellow line means you can't cross the center line and a white line means you can, and then they throw in a construction zone in there and everything goes, haywire. We can't have cars running over construction workers. So we have to have that speed versus quality effect in consideration at all times.
So thanks, Mike. So Dave, you talked about quality, consistency, relevance. Mike's already talked a little bit about AI inside. It seems like when it comes to the tools and technologies for making data-centric AI work, making AI work in general, there seems to be a lot of opportunity. I mean, the tools themselves have evolved from the old silos of, well, this is my data quality tool, and this is my MDM tool, and this is my reference data tool, and this is my data virtualization tool, Seems like the tooling has evolved, more platforms and more AI inside those toolings. Where do you see the technology enablement happening today? Where are some of the areas where people are seeing benefit?
I think technology is evolving so rapidly these days. I think a lot of people, when we talk about AI, we're sort of, many are thinking about, we say garbage in, garbage out, like predictive AI or traditional AI. So, we go get the data, we control everything, we build a model, we get some output, right? And that's sort of, in that scenario, you control everything. If we go to the world of like large language models or small language models, these things are gigungous, right? And they take so much, that's a technical term, right? Gigungous. And they take so much energy and resource to build, most companies won't be able to afford that. So what we're going to do, for any organization, you're going to go pull one off the shelf and want to use it. Now, the question I think is in my mind is, so given that everybody has access to the same model, what's your competitive advantage? And I think it's really that context you apply to the model, mostly right now through a RAG implementation, but what's going to feed that is the metadata within your organization, right? And if people don't know about metadata, think about like this, it's data about data. Go to Amazon, look up shoes. How many filters are there for shoes? There's like 50. What size, women's, men's, material, etc. That's metadata, data about data. Without those filters, I can't find the right shoes to buy. And so organizations have this vast trove of untapped potential in the metadata, I think, that's going to feed these RAG implementations in the future. And I think it's, I have a lot of, customers, exploring that right now. And it's quite interesting to me, because if you can't describe your data, find it, or understand how it should be used, if it should be used, trust it, you have this, you're building this house of cards that's gonna crash.
Besides defining giganormous, do you want to define, which you say you have, you want to define RAG for a sec?
So RAG is stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, and essentially it's where you can apply your organization's context or data. You can make this available to the generative AI system, but it's not being used to fine-tune or train that generative AI model, that large language model. People have a lot of privacy and sensitivity concerns. So that's the RAG allows it to make it available to that, but it's not used to train a model. It's just used to help inform the response.
I can provide a good example there if it's appropriate. I mentioned the R&D. If I work in R&D versus if I work in production, and I have access to different levels of products, then the agent that RAG agent can produce the data that my training model can then use to enhance the result or the response. So it's appropriate. There's context around who is asking. That's one example of an agent in that RAG model.
Guy, technology evolving. Where do you see, you're a CTO? I mean, you founded a company to bring new technology to the market. Let's talk about that, the evolving technology and enabling data-centric.
I think in many ways, it's less about bringing brand new technologies and more about making better and smarter use of the technologies we've got. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was talking to someone yesterday as an example, and we were talking about BI ready versus AI ready. And I use example, I was doing some fine tuning of an LLM a few weeks ago as part of a blog post. And I built my pipeline that downloaded a bunch of data and used it to fine tune my model, and then did some accuracy calculations and things like that, and promoted it. And I made a mistake because I'm human and people make mistakes. And I had 1,000 rows of data, but I accidentally loaded it 1,000 times. So I was fine tuned. Basically, I was massively overfitting to my fine tuning data. Now, if this was a BI use case and someone looked and said, well, hang on, we've loaded our sales data 1,000 times, it's pretty quickly someone's going to say that's actually more revenue than like Amazon does. That data's probably wrong. We need to, go fix it. But the interesting thing here was I worked on this for over a week before I realized that I was operating with a model that was really badly off and really badly overfitted, because you don't get that kind of, that in your face, error. It was producing weird results, but it wasn't anything like as obvious. And so, like, if I think, well, what should I have done? What step did I miss out? I hadn't put data quality, for example, into my pipeline. When I downloaded data, the first thing I should have done, I've got some new data before I use it. So I've extracted some data, or I've loaded some data. Now I need to apply some data quality, some sanity checking to it. Maybe I need to do some enrichment to it before I start using it for things. And then the other thing was I need to apply some automated testing at the end of it. It's all very well saying, we're going to regularly rebuild models or fine-tune models and things like that. But that's no different to building a new software application. Do we just push it into production because the build process ran? Or do we actually then apply some tests to it? How do I know this model is better than the one that preceded it? So I think there are some new techniques that are coming out, particularly on kind of the right-hand side of this, in terms of when I've built or fine-tuned a model, how do I test that to confirm that A, it's sane, and B, it's better than what it replaces? But I think an awful lot of it is just taking the tools that we've got about data ingestion, data quality, data governance, as David was talking about, understanding that metadata, bringing all that together in kind of the end-to-end process. If we can nail that, the AI piece that we put in that pipeline actually isn't radically complicated. And this is going back to that data-centric bit, is we're having to do all the stuff that we've done previously, but better, and then we're kind of dropping this AI piece in the somewhere in the middle or to the right-hand side of that pipeline. So I think it's less about new technologies, really, and more about the existing technologies and approaches we've got are so much more critical, because if you get them wrong, the impacts of that are less visible and potentially more catastrophic.
So extreme. So in some ways, you're saying the technology is there, but an extreme focus on process.
Yes. Process.
Inductor.
Miss my calling.
Just maybe a comment on, this notion of being able to understand how my model's performing. We go back to predictive or traditional AI. There's mathematical formulas to understand this. It's pretty straightforward, even though there are 80 different definitions of fairness mathematically. Fine, we can pick one that maybe agree and do that. But when we're talking about generative AI, nobody has cracked the nut, in my opinion, on this. If you're generating words, audio, images, video at scale, how do you monitor that? Some of that is subjective, and I don't think there's any technology today that can monitor or even understand the quality of the outputs. You need to understand the quality of the inputs and the outputs. Generative AI, I think it's a huge gap in the market that nobody's talking about.
No, I think that's maybe in many ways the next horizon. I think where we're going to see some really innovative technologies. But there are some techniques. Certainly, the technique I've been using, and it goes back to kind of your speed quality thing, is that one of the reasons that we're doing, for example, training on our own data or fine tuning our data is because we don't want to use a gigantic model for something, because that's very, very expensive. So we want to use a much smaller, much more specific model, and that runs much faster and much more cheaply, and that's great. But what that does allow you to do is a trade-off to say, okay, well, I can use a very good, very powerful, very expensive model to validate and test my smaller, cheaper, more specific model. And that's kind of what I was doing in that last case. I train a model with 7 billion parameters, get it to the point where I thought I was happy with it, and then I use a 400 billion parameter model to say, okay, these are the outputs of this model. Do they make sense? So you're effectively using a big, expensive model to check up on or score and I was actually getting it to produce a quantitative score of the smaller, cheaper, faster model.
Got it.
That's my days in that area.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today.
Really, we're talking about agility and different approaches and that sort of thing. Mike, you had a diagram. You had some thoughts on this speed, agility, and quality.
I'll lead into that.
Yeah.
I'll lead into that diagram with, just talking about the triple constraint, right? You can have it fast, cheap, or good. Pick two. And I think that really applies in the AI space as well. If you're open AI and you have investors with deep pockets, you can hire an army of people to check the quality of your output and continue to train your model. And that's exactly what they did. They went to Kenya, I think, and hired Kenyans to evaluate the output. A lot of organizations don't have deep pockets where you can hire an army of people. So, another option that you can do is add an agent. And I'm kind of leading into the technologies because that's just where my brain naturally goes. You can actually build an agent that checks the output of your result and then iterates, keeps sending it back until it meets some level of conformity or quality. Defining that is hard, as Dave said earlier. Now, 80. I didn't know what you meant by your 80 mathematical.
Well, yeah, they're like, so like people say, like, hey, this has got to be fair. Oh, let's be fair. Yeah, we're pro fairness, of course. But to mathematically define it, there's like 80 different mathematical formulations I've seen in the research on fair. Like, how do you mathematically define that?
That is the challenge. What is the requirement? And then how do we technically implement that? So I do have this diagram here. I think you can see it. And it's really just that triple constraint represented in two dimensions. So based on your quality and speed requirements, and I put in here just off the top of my head, and actually I had some help from Dwight Bond. He sits on our board of directors and pretty involved in the AI community. And he helped me brainstorm a few of these. But if you need, if you're just recommending social media content for somebody to view, the quality and speed both can be at the low end of the spectrum there. But up at the upper right hand, medical diagnosis, lives are on the line. And you better make sure that you have the right result. And so you're going to need, first, quality checks on the output that are automated, and then a doctor in the loop, a human validating those. Because you don't want to make, for obvious, it's pretty obvious, you don't want to make the wrong diagnosis, especially in life-threatening situations, or turn a non-life-threatening situation into one, worse yet. And down at the bottom right is the self-driving car, whose inputs are constantly changing, who's dealing with weather and construction zones and pedestrians and bicyclists and, and all those things. And at the same time, a mistake can be fatal. And so the investment needs to consider where on this two-dimensional continuum you are. And then your other considerations is the time, resources, tech, and security around that data. So your triple constraint would be, your time/resources. Do you have humans available? What is the cost of curating your data in order to achieve the quality that you're looking for? Is latency appropriate? In a medical diagnosis, you can use data that's a few days old. In fact, you should be taking a few days to make the right decision. But in a self-driving car, you have to use data that's milliseconds old. And so make that consideration. We've talked a little about tech. I think you're going to lead into another question on that later, so I'll skip that. I would mention the security aspect, just from the perspective that not everybody should see all the data, even in the training model. And so that context of who's asking, That provides context itself, but then what should they be considering? What should that person have access to see and consider in making that decision? I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And it kind of goes back to what Guy said about, for use, and Dave said relevancy. He talked about quality, consistency, and relevance. A lot of the stuff we're talking about, though, I mean, this is the data management hygiene challenge of the last 60 years. Just keeps getting worse in terms of the number of silos and the amount of data and the types of data, blah, 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 blah. And it also, we have better technologies for attacking these problems. But the Data Ops Live lives, with those technologies. That's why Elation lives. That we have these processes. That's why Data Ops lives. We need the people. That's why Infobia lives. All brought together. It's a lot. And if I'm watching this, I was just like, oh my God, another set of shoulds. How I've got so much job security, and that there's data sucks, and it's going to be really hard. But let's kind of bring some practical advice here to the folks. What are some good starting points? Where would you focus? That sort of thing, so that the lessons learned and the things you guys have seen from your clients, how can those become useful and implementable ideas for the viewers? And so let's start with you, Dave. Where do you think some decent starting points are, some wins? Where would you tell people to focus?
I think this might be maybe an answer the audience may not expect, but I think you need to start with the organization and the people within that organization. Elation spends a lot of, we've invested a lot in understanding, data culture maturity, and we have, different dimensions that associated with that. But, if you think about it, if you have how many data scientists are in any organization, is it 1%, 2%? There's some, they're expensive, short supply, but if you can get more people to participate and understand in the data analytics and AI process, your organization is going to be better off for that. So that's what we call, data culture maturity. And we have a model that folks can go and check out. But I think starting with the people in the organization is critical, because we've seen that the more people that can participate in the process, better things happen in the end, versus, just leaving it to the few and the experts. I mean, certainly you need those experts, but you need the surround to make it work for your entire organization. So people and process.
Great. That's a great one. And I guess I could probably find a Sun Tzu quote about having a bigger army.
Sure.
He's supportive of that. That's a great starting point and a good lens. And I'd bring more resources to the problem, more mental power, more diversity of thought, etc. Guy, what would you add? What do you see with your clients? And you talked about a 10x achievement. That's fantastic. How'd they do that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, again, maybe a little bit controversial, is ask yourself if this is something you should be doing. Don't underestimate the power of no, or at the very least, not yet. Snowflake CEO said, you can't have an AI strategy without a data strategy. And as you said, to some extent, people have been wrestling with this problem for 60 years. If you don't have a decent level of data maturity, if you're not building your data products, across distributed teams and agile ways, if you don't have automated testing, institutionally in your organization for that data quality and that governance, if you don't have rapid development cycles and automated environments, you don't have those things in place, bluntly, you probably shouldn't be going the next stage. This is very much a crawl, walk, run. And, we all know what happens if you try and skip that walk phase. Ultimately, you end up flat on your face. And in business terms, that means, a lot of disasters, a lot of wasted money, probably a few careers on the rock. So I'd say, first of all, just be honest with yourself and say, is this something we should be getting into, at least at an operationalized level? Yeah, you want to do some sandbox experiments, great, fine, go for that. I think the other thing that I would say is who are you going to start with? Who are your personas? Because I think it said at the beginning, we don't have enough model builders, we don't have enough data scientists. One of the big things to me about data-centric AI is that we're moving the personas we're talking about from the more specialist roles to the much more generalist data engineering roles. So we're taking, in many ways, we're kind of packaging up a lot of the AI functionality and we're handing it back to the data engineers, which in many ways I think are the right people, because they're the ones that understand the flows of data, where it's coming from, what the data quality should look like, and all those other things. I think Dave said at the beginning, data scientists just regard, well, I've got a CSV export of data, it's a fixed thing, I assume it's good. Data engineers live and breathe that this data is constantly changing, constantly got quality problems. So the thing I would say is if you're confident that it's the right time for you, think about your personas and who should you be bringing to bear on this problem. And I would say, if you want to operationalize this, you want it to actually have a real impact on your business, you're probably better off starting with your data engineers than you are with kind of the data scientists and the model builders.
Great. Well, that's a good insight. A Guy, where would you add as practical advice?
For Mike.
Mike.
Excuse me. Mike.
Yeah,
Sorry. Keep doing
I
that.
think everything, obviously everything they said is true. And what you said earlier, Robert, kind of stuck with me. You have to have the right tools like Elation. You have to have the right processes like DataOps Live. And you have to have the right people in your organization to actually implement those. Somebody said early on, I believe it was you again, Robert, a great idea is worthless until it's implemented. Something I'm paraphrasing, that's essentially that. So we don't have enough time in our organization to make all those mistakes ourselves. It's expensive to try to implement things that don't work. And so I think that's something that we've been able to help our clients with, is just don't go down that path. That tool is used for this piece, and it might seem like it could be used for that capability in your organization, but there's a better one, but it's not optimized to that. So helping organizations not go down the wrong path, I think bringing in a third party, it's a little self-serving here, but bringing in someone who's implemented successfully is a great way. We bring a perspective so that you don't have to make all the mistakes, but also so that the elegant solution can be discovered. The elegant solution is seldom obvious. You would agree, right? And perspective helps find that elegant solution. Back to Sun Tzu, he also said, know your enemy. So where do you start? I think you have to start in what differentiates you from your enemy. After all, they are doing AI too. So you're in a race. They might just be doing ChatGPT to generate letters, to their bosses or to their customers, but eventually they're going to realize that they have data, first-party data, that only your competitors have data that only they have. And when they start to use that for their advantage, they're going to beat you. So you have to be first to that race. Find out what you have that they don't, what differentiates you, and start leveraging that first-party data owned by your organization that you're privy to, and start leveraging that to increase your top line or bottom line or customer exposure or marketing strategy or whatever it is that strategically helps your organization the most.
Well, that makes sense, and that echoes back to what you were talking about, Dave. Dave, so around this point of getting some extra resources, I don't want this to come across like a commercial for your services groups at DataOps Live or Elation. What I'd like to understand a little bit is about how those groups typically work with your clients, and also work with third party. Maybe there's some people in from Deloitte or someone else. What are some of the kind of engagements and assistance you get for people that are implementing your products? To help them with some of these roles and activities, et cetera. Start with you, Dave.
Yeah, so we look at this a couple different dimensions, but I think the previous question, where should you start? I think it's important for companies to understand, what is the use case they're trying to solve, and what is the most simplistic MVP you can build to solve that. You might need AI, it might not. You might need a simple report. But in terms of so once our customers have it clear, so we can help them identify They know what they typically kind of have an idea of what they want to do. We help them refine it. We have sort of onboarding services that help them, populate the data catalog, so people can find the data within the organization, things like that. And then we have services around, adoption, and we actually have metrics. I have a long history, mostly in the analytics side of the business. This is one of my first deep dives into the data side of it. I always wished every year I had to justify the expense of my analytics software. Why are we spending so much for this, set of tools and what have you? And it was hard to do. We actually have our data intelligence platform is instrumented so customers can actually understand and articulate the value. We can attach it to use cases, the value they're receiving from using the data intelligence platform. And I think that it's amazing. And so we can help with the adoption and things like that. So it's quite interesting being able to attach your product and service to the business outcome that the company is achieving with that is it's hard to do, but we have some intelligence that can do that.
Well, it seems before we go to Guy, it seems like if you can instrument that, not only does that value help justify the continued resource and investment in your idea of building an army, at least people feel like they're getting some victories. They can really see some benefit and achievement, and that momentum should beget more momentum. Do you find that an energy spike when you get that data?
Yeah, absolutely. Because people, you make people heroes, and they'll be your best advocates. Better than any marketing I will ever do in my life. So you can build those champions up within those organizations for sure.
Okay, great, thanks. Guy, talk about services implementation, bringing process into places that never, process is a dirty word. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a different view on this in the sense we don't have a professional services organization. We never have, almost certainly never will. Our goal is to make our customers self-sufficient as quickly as possible. Yes, we do have implementation teams and we do have customer success teams, and we do work with, many of our customers will have, one or more, RSI or GSI professional service organization in there to augment their team. But we we view the problem, and I 100% agree with, what Dave said earlier. If you want to do this new stuff, you've got to bring resources and people to bear on it. It's not going to happen by magic. Our view is that most of our customers, frankly, can't afford to build an army. Armies are expensive. What we're trying to do and what we achieve, with the vast majority of our customers is you take the people that are there, you take away all of the laborious process, all of the manual stuff, all the stuff that can be automated, and you 10x them. So, rather than having an army of 100, we'll still have, we'll have a small team of 10, but it's 10 superheroes as opposed to 100 kind of rank and file soldiers. And so you're, essentially what we're doing is moving people from having to do the boring, laborious, mundane stuff day in, day out, free them up from that. What do they do with the time they have spare? Well, first of all, they can deliver more business value because there's always more requirements for business and that's a universal. But secondly, they can use some of that freed up capacity to start doing these new things. And, what engineer doesn't want to be working on, cool new AI stuff as opposed to, trying to fix another manual data load that went wrong overnight? No engineer gets out of bed in the morning for that. So that's, to your point about, you make your customers heroes, you make your users heroes, make them happy, they'll be your biggest advocates. We see that across our customer base because we've taken them, we made them so much more efficient and taken away from all the boring stuff, freed up time to do the fun, interesting stuff.
So you guys sell a bat belt for data engineers. That's awesome. And
it really works.
Yeah. Mike, I'm going to start to close this up now. What are some of your final thoughts in this area? And also a little bit, if the people want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Oh, we're at infovia.com, and I'm happy to have a conversation with just about anybody about anything in tech. I tend to go deep into the tech quickly as a former software engineer and data guy, and then founder of a company. that's right or wrong, that's where I tend to dive. So happy to have those conversations. I think what we bring to the table is that we've done this before for somewhere over 50 organizations, and they're all happy. We train the organization on how to do, kind of like Guy said, train you, give confidence to your team on how to be more productive, and spend your time doing the things only humans can do. Automate the rest, code templates and metadata, to Dave's point earlier, are your friend. The more you know about your data, the easier it is to use automation to build your data platform. So that's something we've started doing, is eating our own dog food, using the metadata within our own organization to help our clients move faster. And also automation helps iterate faster too. So you can make mistakes and then discard that solution and regenerate. That used to be taboo in the software engineering world. You wanted to have all the requirements before you built anything. And now I'd say it's completely the opposite of that. As soon as you know something, build it, validate it, get in front of your user. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, a prototype's worth 1,000,000. I sometimes say. So put it in front of them, and then iterate quickly using tools like DataOps Live and Elation, knowing your metadata, using automation, and having people who've done it before successfully.
Great. Thanks for that sum up on your side there, Mike. How about Guy? How about you? Got a sum up for us and a little bit of how to contact you?
Yeah, I mean, I strongly echo what Mike just said. That get the foundations right, get your processes right. Don't make sure that you've got these kind of robust data pipelines. Make sure you've got robust data quality. Make sure you've got robust development processes. Because then when you start taking in something new, like you start really looking at AI at a proper operational industrialized level. As Mike said, which model should I use? Well, I don't have to spend, 6 months analyzing it. I'll spin up 5 different branches. I'll put 5 different model configurations in. I'll run them all. I'll see which one works best. If you've got the foundations there, when you start bringing something new and with a lot of variables in, you can iterate through very quickly. You can make 19 mistakes and take the 20th success story, and you can do that in a day. So yeah, very much support what Mike said. Anyone that wants to get in contact with me about the technology, about the people, about the process, dataops.live, or look for me, Guy Adams, on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for your contributions today. Dave, you're the one, your article, model-centric versus data-centric, spurring this whole thing. So I'll let you have the last word here. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Bob. I think at the core of everything we're talking about today, it's data. It's that foundational element to everything we were talking about, and it needs to be trusted. And you see my shirt here, if we're talking about AI, it needs to be AI ready. But to be able to leverage that data, you need to be able to find, you need to be able to understand, and you need to be able to trust that data. When I was doing data science, I didn't know if there were policies on the data, if I should be using it or whatever. So when I found a pile of data and I started analyzing it, the world has evolved. And we need to be more cognizant about a lot of the privacy regulations and things that are coming up. So you can check out, Elation can help with all of this. So elation.com, and it's really built for everyone. It's open and extensible, and it's proven. It's trusted by 40% of the Fortune 100. So we know what we're doing. We've been here before. So I encourage everybody to check it out. And we're people-centric. So there's lots of different styles, but if you don't involve the people, if you try to start with sort of an enterprise architect and a command and control style, say data governance, for instance, data governance is done to you, and typically it doesn't work very well. So you have to involve the entire organization and build up that data culture maturity. So, and on a side note, people are interested in Tiny Tech Guides, got a new book out on generative AI, LLM patterns, and one on actually business use cases. So if you're technical, check out the patterns one. If you want more about how it's applied in the world, check out the use case book.
And then they can just find you on LinkedIn as well.
LinkedIn, wherever I am, I'm everywhere.
Great. At an airport near you.
There we go.
I'll find you in Vermont when I'm in town.
Yeah, come on. I look forward to that. We'll have a tasty beverage. I'll share some semiconductor stories.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate time with you guys. I took a full page of notes, so I learn on these every time I'm with smart people like you all.
Well, hopefully the viewers learned as well. And thank you guys for providing those contributions, just sharing your thoughts, ideas, histories, examples, etc., technologies, guidance. These things have proven pretty useful to folks, and I think they can appreciate the value of today's session. So thank you, and we will see you next month. Bye, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Cheers to you.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out.